Okay, class, first I want to thank Dr. Caldwell for allowing me to do this presentation again. Okay, so we're going to start. Okay, so I did peer-mediated learning and an emphasis on communalism. So, Chapter 16, which focuses on peer-mediated learning and its connection to communalism, this chapter is really important because it shifts how we think about teaching. And instead of seeing learning as something that only comes from the teacher or another person at the school, it shows how students can actually play a major role in each other's learning. Throughout this presentation, I'm just going to explain the main ideas from the chapter, go over specific strategies teachers can use, and connect everything to RTI, and then show how this would look in a real classroom setting if you were teaching. Okay, so introduction. The main purpose of this chapter is to show how teachers can improve both student engagement and academic performance at the same time. One of the biggest ideas is that engagement alone is not enough. A student might be participating, but if they're not producing right or correct answers, if they're not getting the right material out of it, they're not actually learning in a meaningful way. It's kind of like practicing a sport in the wrong way. If you're practicing in the wrong way, you're not eventually going to learn the skill right. This chapter also emphasizes on using peer interaction as a learning tool. Instead of seeing students talking or working together as a distraction, maybe teachers should use that interaction to support learning and understanding. Another important point is that all of these strategies can connect to cultural relevant teaching. While instruction matches how students naturally learn and interact, it becomes more meaningful and students are more likely to stay engaged and succeed. Okay, on to the next slide. Okay, so before we really get started with everything, I'm gonna ask a question to the class. What makes student engagement actually lead to real learning? Okay, this is when I would allow everyone to respond. I would say that a student really can look engaged. They might be paying attention. They could be nodding or answering or not answering questions. But if they're consistently getting answers wrong, they're not really learning. Over time, this can really lead to frustration. It can lead to them having lower confidence when talking up in class, or just participating in work. And often it really leads to behavioral issues outside not just the basic in-class things. So this chapter pushes us to think about the quality of engagement. It's not just about being involved, it's really about being successful while being involved. That's what leads to real learning and long-term understanding. Okay, so the first concept we're going to look at is peer-mediated learning. Peer-mediated learning is an instructional approach where students can work together, support each other's academic growth. Instead of the teacher doing all the explaining, students are actively involved in participating skills, explaining concepts, or correcting each other. I think really one of the most important parts of this approach is immediate feedback when students work together. Really, they can catch mistakes right away and help each other understand when stuff is wrong. This also shifts the classroom from being teacher-centered to student-centered. Students take on roles like tutor or learner, which makes them feel more responsible in their own learning. Like when I was in school, when I was gave a different title, and especially when students are given just even a title that's more than just student, they intend to engage more and feel more like they have more responsibility to do it. Another big benefit is that when students explain concepts to each other, they actually deepen their own understanding. Teaching something forces you to think about it more clearly. So just in the way that we as teachers really need to understand our subjects to teach it, it works in the same favor towards students. So if they have to understand it to teach it to another student, overall they're going to understand it better. Okay. So second thing is communalism. Communalism is really the key concept of this chapter. It focuses on group identity, shared success, and working together toward common goals in the classroom. In the classroom, this means students are not just responsible for their own learning, but also might be responsible for the learning of their peers or other people in the classroom. This really creates a stronger sense of community in your classroom. The idea is especially important for cultural responsive teaching, I think. Many students, especially students of African American descent, Hispanic, Latinos descent, Asian descent, and Native American descent here, feel a lot more comfortable and motivated in environments where collaborations and relationships are emphasized. So if they're feeling like their culture and that you really respect what they're thinking and what's going on in their lives, then they're a lot more likely to engage in your classroom. Okay, so for another thing we're going to look at is class-wide peer tutoring, or CWPT. Class-wide peer tutoring is one of the main strategies discussed in this chapter. In this approach, students take turns being both the tutor and the learner. This is important because it gives students more opportunities to practice, which is essential for learning. It also allows them to receive immediate feedback instead of waiting for the teacher. For example, like this slide shows, in a math lesson, students can work in pairs where one solves a problem and maybe the other checks and explains the mistakes. Then they switch roles probably. This helps both students, the one solving the problem, get practice, and the one explaining strengthens their understanding by teaching. Sorry. It really also builds the confidence of both students. So the one that's teaching and the one that's learning. It also may feel more comfortable for students that are struggling to learn from other classmates that they view as friends, instead of a teacher that they might view as looking down on them or expecting too much of them in the classroom. Overall, CWPT really makes learning a more active and collaborative thing in the classroom. Okay, cooperative versus communal learning. This slide compares cooperative and communal learning. Cooperative learning is what most people are familiar with. Students work together to complete a task. However, really the focus is often just on finishing the assignment. Communal learning goes deeper. It focuses more on relationships, shared responsibility, and making sure everyone in the group understands the material. So instead of dividing up work, students are actually supporting each other's learning. Research shows that student communal learning environments often perform better because they feel more supported and connected. This connection increases both engagement and academic success. Students in communal learning environments often show higher engagement and stronger academic performance because of emphasis on support and shared success. Is really the main point of what we're trying to get at here. Okay, so our third strategy is response cards. So this is a very specific strategy that that teachers can implement right away in their classroom. Response cards are pretty simple, but they're really important. So students write their own answers on a board or a card and show them at the same time. in class when a teacher asks out loud for a question for everyone's. This isn't. This is really important because instead of one or just two students answering, it shows that every student is involved and allows the teacher to see visually which students may need help at that moment. This strategy can be used across different subjects. I mean, like everything, like reading, math, vocabulary. It's super flexible and effective. Okay, so the cultural learning characteristics. So communalism, movement, expressiveness, orality, and verve. So collaboration and shared success. So movement expressiveness is learning through movement and activities. So that's doing different group activities where they're getting up around the classroom and involving not just their minds but their bodies and each other. Orality, speaking, discussion, and call and response were big things. Okay, and verve, energy, variety, and engagement. Okay, so why this really matters. When instruction reflects on how students naturally learn, it becomes more meaningful and accessible. This alignment increases engagement, it strengthens participation, and leads to higher levels of academic success in your classroom and just in the school in general. Okay, so how this chapter connects to RTI. So we can look at Tier 1. At Tier 1, these strategies are used with all students to improve engagement and increase correct responses. Are the correct way of doing the work. At Tier 2, students who will struggle to receive additional to support in smaller groups, often still using peer-based strategies. Okay, and then now we look at Tier 3. At Tier 3, students receive individualized interventions that are more intensive. One of the most important ideas here is that students should receive strong Tier 1 instruction before being referred to additional support. Really, sometimes students are labeled as struggling when the real issue at hand is that we're not giving them enough opportunities and to engage or respond correctly. Like, all students learn and it can express their knowledge differently, and to really assess our students' knowledge, we need to assess in different ways. And this chapter really encourages teachers to strengthen instruction first before moving students through the RTI process. Okay, so now we move into our real life application scenario. So in our first grade classroom of, let's say, 22 students, several students are struggling to understand place value, especially when breaking numbers into tens, ones. The class includes diverse learners with different academic levels and learning needs. Okay, so let's look at our challenge first. Our challenge is only a few students participate during the whole group instruction. Several students show confusion when identifying tens and ones. Many students give incorrect responses and becoming disengaged in the lesson. Okay, so let's move into how we would deal with this and what's our intervention. So we would try to implement class-wide peer tutoring, CWPT, which students pair with students pairs. Students take turns solving problems, breaking 34s into 3s to 3 10s and 4 1s. We could use response cards so all students answer at the same time so we can see which students need more help and we can help them individually. Okay, so the RTI alignment. Tier 1, CWPT and response cards used to support the entire class. Tier 2, small group peer instruction for students still struggling. Okay, so fidelity and implementation. For peer-mediated strategies to be effective, really, we need to both improve engagement. Wait, I'll put the. Okay. Fidelity and implementation. For peer-mediated strategies to be effective, they must be implemented with fidelity. This means really that teachers must follow the intervention plan with consistency and allow time, so not rush things and not get frustrated if things aren't changing right away in the classroom. When strategies are not implemented correctly, they may appear ineffective, leading to unnecessary referrals. Class-wide strategies are especially important because they support all students rather than focusing on only a few individuals. Okay, so another question for everyone. How can focusing on only a few students impact the rest of the class? I'd take a couple answers and we talk about it for a second. Okay, so final conclusions. To conclude, really, this presentation and this chapter, peer-mediated learning is a powerful way to improve both engagement and academic success across the board. By focusing on correct responses, collaboration, and really the relevance in the culture, teachers can create more effective and inclusive learning environments for all of our students. These strategies should be used at the Tier 1 level to ensure that really all students have access to strong instruction before moving to higher levels of support. Overall, this chapter shows us that learning is most effective when students actively involve and support each other in the classroom. Okay, thank you so much.